Plants are living organisms. They come in many different shapes, sizes, and colors, but they all need air, water, nutrients, and sunlight to live. Plants cover much of our planet. Every blade of grass, tree, flower, bush, fern, or moss you see is a plant. Large or small, on the land or in the sea, from forests to deserts, plants are almost everywhere. Plants are so important to life on Earth that without them, we could not survive. Plants create food from the sun's energy and form the foundation of nearly every food chain on the planet. Plants produce the oxygen in the air we breathe, helping animals to stay alive. Plants also create important habitats where animals can live and provide humans with many natural resources. So what makes something a plant? Plants are special on the cellular level. They are always made of more than one cell, meaning there are no single-celled plants, and their cells have special parts. One special part of a plant cell is the cell wall. Cell walls are rigid and unbending. Since plants do not have skeletons, these cell walls give them their structure. Without cell walls, tall trees, cactus, and even little flowers would not be able to stand up. Many plants are easy to recognize by their green leaves. In fact, most plants are green or have green parts. This green color is caused by another special part of their cells called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts contain chlorophyll, which is green. Chlorophyll is what allows plants to carry out photosynthesis and make food from the sun's energy. During photosynthesis, plants use the sun's energy to change water and carbon dioxide into a kind of sugar. They use this sugar to grow and develop, and store the extra in their leaves, roots, or fruits. In addition to sugar, plants produce oxygen during photosynthesis. Since plants do not need the oxygen, they release it into the atmosphere, where animals and people can breathe it in.
It's worth noting that cultivation of crops seems to have arisen independently over the course of millennia in a number of places, from Africa to China to the Americas, using crops that naturally grew nearby: rice in Southeast Asia, maize in Mexico, potatoes in the Andes, wheat in the Fertile Crescent, yams in West Africa. People around the world began to abandon their foraging for agriculture. And since so many communities made this choice independently, it must have been a good choice, right? Even though it meant less music and scootily pooping. Thanks, Thought Bubble. All right, to answer that question, let's take a look at the advantages and disadvantages of agriculture. Advantage: controllable food supply. You might have droughts or floods, but if you're growing the crops and breeding them to be hardier, you have a better chance of not starving. Disadvantage: in order to keep feeding people as the population grows, you have to radically change the environment of the planet. Advantage: especially if you grow grain, you can create a food surplus, which makes cities possible, and also the specialization of labor. Like in the days before agriculture, everybody's job was foraging, and it took about 1,000 calories of work to create 1,000 calories of food. And it was impossible to create large population centers. But if you have a surplus, agriculture can support people not directly involved in the production of food. Like, for instance, tradespeople who can devote their lives to better farming equipment, which in turn makes it easier to produce more food more efficiently, which in time makes it possible for a corporation to turn a profit on this 99-cent double cheeseburger. This is delicious, by the way. It's actually terrible, and it's very cold. And I wish that I had not eaten it. I mean, can we just compare what I was promised to what I was delivered? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is not that. Some would say that large and complex agricultural communities that can support cities and eventually inexpensive meat sandwiches are not necessarily beneficial to the planet or even to its human inhabitants. Although that's a bit of a tough argument to make coming to you as I am in a series of ones and zeros. Advantage, agriculture can be practiced all over the world, although in some cases it takes extensive manipulation of the environment, like, irrigation, controlled flooding, terracing, that kind of thing. Disadvantage, farming is hard. So hard, in fact, that one is tempted to claim ownership over other humans and then have them till the land on your behalf, which is the kind of non-ideal social order that tends to be associated with agricultural communities. So why did agriculture happen? Wait, I haven't talked about herders. Herders, man, always getting the short end of the stick. Herding is a really good and interesting alternative to foraging and agriculture. You domesticate some animals and then you take them on the road with you. The advantages of herding are obvious. First, you get to be a cowboy. Also, animals provide meat and milk, but they also help out with shelter because they can provide wool and leather. The downside is that you have to move around a lot because your herd always needs new grass, which makes it hard to build cities unless you are the Mongols.
Steak, fried chicken, bacon, pork belly and sausages are just the best things. Eating meat has become so trivial that many people don't consider something a proper meal if there's no animal involved. Which is pretty amazing, since only a few decades ago, meat was a luxury product. Today, you can get a cheeseburger for $1. Paradoxically, meat is pretty much the most inefficient way of feeding humans. If we look at it on a global scale, our meaty diet is literally eating up the planet. Why is that, and what can we do about it without giving up steak? Humans keep a lot of animals for food. Currently about 23 billion chickens, 1.5 billion cattle, and roughly 1 billion pigs and sheep. That's a lot of mouths to feed, so we've transformed Earth into a giant feeding ground. 83% of its farmland is used for livestock, for example as pasture, and to farm fodder crops like corn and soy. That's 26% of Earth's total land area. If we include the water we need for these plants, meat and dairy production accounts for 27% of global fresh water consumption. Unfortunately, meat production is like a black hole for resources. Since animals are living things, most of their food is used to keep them alive while they grow their tasty parts. Only a fraction of the nutrients from fodder crops end up in the meat we buy in the end. Cows, for example, convert only about 4% of the proteins and 3% of the calories of the plants we feed to them into beef. More than 97% of the calories are lost to us. To create 1 kilogram of steak, a cow needs to eat up to 25 kilos of grain and uses up to 15,000 liters of water. Animal products are guzzling up tons of food, but they only make up 18% of the calories humans eat. According to projections, we could nourish an additional 3.5 billion people if we just ate the stuff we feed to animals. To make our favorite food group even more unsustainable, about 15% of all greenhouse gas emissions caused by humans are created by the meat industry, as much as by all ships, planes, trucks and cars combined.
We all eat on a daily basis, but have you ever really thought about how many chemicals and ingredients go into your food? I mean, look at this list of chemicals here. You probably haven't heard of most, let alone tried to pronounce them, and yet you eat all of these every single time you eat a blueberry? Surprised? You shouldn't be. After all, everything around us is made up of chemicals, from the water you drink to the air you breathe. Literally, water is a chemical substance. Which is why it's frustrating when companies consistently tout their foods as chemical-free, or you hear somebody say, if you can't pronounce an ingredient, don't eat it. Feel like a banana? Hope you're ready for the chemical goodness that it brings. Seriously, we can break down any food to look like a confusing long list of foreign ingredients. Stick this list beside a heart candy, and which seems more chemical-free? But what about all the awful man-made chemicals, you ask? Surely they're much worse. In a lot of cases, yes, but not always. Consider this beautiful apple compared to sodium thiopental used in lethal injections. Would you guess that the seeds within apples have roughly the same toxicity level? The amygdalin in the seeds and the sodium thiopental both become toxic at around 1,000 milligrams per kilogram of your body weight. Of course, apples contain very little risk because there is so little in the seeds you'd have to consume a lot. And yet, if we compare citric acid in lemons to aspartame, an artificial sweetener, we find that neither are toxic at 1,000 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. The truth is, almost everything is poison at a high enough dose. Some are lethal after just a few milligrams, while others require kilograms to bring death. But the dose is the poison. We should be thinking about these things, but not in a black and white way. Which chemicals are actually more harmful? We can't just give blanket statements to natural versus synthetic, because natural chemicals aren't always good for you, and man-made chemicals are not inherently dangerous. Have you ever eaten a natural watermelon before? Probably not, considering in 3000 BC they were about 55 millimeters wide, 80 grams, 1.9% sugar, and extremely bitter with only 6 varieties. Now, watermelons are 660 millimeters wide, weigh around 8 kilograms, have 6.2% sugar, are seedless, and come in 1,200 varieties. Thousands of years of human-guided evolution have changed these fruits from their quote-unquote natural form. The same can be said for sweet corn, which comes from the teosinte plant. In 9,000 years, they've become 1,000 times larger, 3.5 times sweeter, and much easier to peel and grow. Now, this isn't a defense of processed foods, and it's not to say that one side is better or worse than the other, but simply that foods are complex things, and a little perspective can go a long way.